Along the shallow coastal waters of almost every ocean on Earth, there are stretches of sand that look completely empty. They are not. Beneath that sand, motionless, breathing through its nostrils so its body does not move, with its eyes turned permanently upward toward a world that cannot see it watching, a predator is waiting. It has been waiting in this same way, in these same shallow waters for millions of years. And the only part of it visible from above is a pair of eyes, flush with the seafloor, staring up. This is the stargazer. It is not large. It does not chase. It does not need to. What evolution has packed into this animal, the number of completely separate weapons compressed into a single body that spends most of its life buried and still, is genuinely difficult to explain until you understand what it was designed to do. And what it was designed to do is convince something alive to swim directly over the exact patch of sand where it is waiting. When that happens, the strike is over before a conscious decision can be made, before a blink. The sand that looked empty a moment ago is suddenly not empty at all. The stargazer is not the most famous predator in the ocean. It is not the largest or the fastest. But in terms of how many different ways it has found to make itself impossible to survive encountering, it is in a category almost nothing else occupies. In this story, we're uncovering one of the most heavily armed ambush predators evolution has ever produced. If you enjoy calm videos like this, please give this one a like and subscribe. It is free, and it helps us to keep making these videos. Now, let's continue. The creature beneath the sand belongs to an ancient family whose members have spent millions of years refining the same remarkable design. Scientists know them collectively as the family Uranoscopidae, a name drawn from the ancient Greek words for sky and to look, giving them the fitting title of the Sky Watchers. Every member of this family spends its life facing upward, its gaze fixed on a world drifting overhead, while the rest of its body remains hidden below. Today, this family includes 51 described living species, divided among 8 genera, alongside one additional genus known only from the fossil record. Although their appearances vary in subtle ways from one coastline to another, they all inherit the same unmistakable blueprint. Every species is entirely marine. Every species belongs to the seafloor. Every species carries the upward-facing eyes and broad flattened head that have become the signature of the stargazer lineage across warm oceans throughout the world. Their size varies more than many people expect. The smallest species reach only about 18 centimeters in length, which is about 7 miles? No, about 7 inches, remaining compact enough to disappear beneath even a thin layer of sediment. At the opposite extreme stands the giant stargazer, Cathetostoma giganteum, growing to around 90 centimeters, which is about 35 inches, nearly the length of a large house cat. Despite that impressive size, the giant species receives remarkably little attention outside marine biology, living in existence almost entirely beyond public awareness. Part of that obscurity comes from a simple misunderstanding. The stargazer is often imagined as another strange inhabitant of the abyss, grouped in the imagination beside glowing creatures from immense depths. In reality, it belongs somewhere far closer to shore. It is a benthic predator, meaning it lives on the seafloor and within the thin layer of water resting immediately above it. Many species inhabit coastal shallows, while others descend farther along continental shelves, reaching depths of about 400 meters, which is about 1,312 feet. Even there, they remain creatures of the bottom rather than the open sea. The benthic world follows a different rhythm from the water above. In open water, movement shapes nearly every encounter. Schools weave through changing currents, hunters pursue fleeing prey, and survival often belongs to those capable of speed or endurance. Along the bottom, another strategy emerges. Sand, mud, shell fragments, and scattered gravel create a landscape where remaining unnoticed can become more valuable than covering distance. Every grain offers an opportunity to disappear rather than escape. Within that landscape, the stargazer represents one of evolution's most complete commitments to patience. Its body is not simply adapted for resting on the seafloor. Every feature aligns with a life spent becoming part of it. The flattened skull lowers the profile against the substrate. The upward-facing mouth and eyes transform the entire front of the animal into a window opening toward passing life above. Even the proportions shared across the family reveal the same enduring architectural plan, repeated across continents and seas because it continues to succeed. Perhaps that is why so few people recognize the stargazer despite its remarkable distribution. It does not migrate across the surface where human attention naturally lingers. It leaves almost no visible trace of its presence. It asks for no dramatic chase and no spectacular display. It simply occupies the narrow boundary where water meets earth beneath the waves, waiting with extraordinary consistency, carrying a design that has endured because it asks remarkably little of the world beyond the arrival of another passing life. Long before another animal drifts into reach, the work has already been done. The hunt begins with architecture rather than movement, with the patient reshaping of the ground itself until the hunter can no longer be separated from the place where it rests. What follows is less like hiding and more like becoming part of the landscape. The process starts with the broad pectoral fins that spread from either side of the body. Although they support the fish in ordinary movement across the bottom, they also serve another purpose entirely. Each fin works like a living shovel, sweeping loose sediment upward in measured strokes. Sand and fine gravel rise over the body, settle again, then rise once more as the fish repeats the motion with remarkable precision. Little by little, a shallow depression forms beneath it, while the surrounding substrate begins to flow across its back. As the body sinks deeper into the hollow it has created, the same fins continue their careful labor. More sediment is gathered and folded across the fish until almost every visible surface disappears beneath the seafloor. Eventually, only the upward-facing eyes and the narrow rim of the mouth remain exposed. Nothing else interrupts the broad stretch of sand. The transformation is so complete that even experienced divers can pass directly overhead without realizing an animal rests beneath them. This remarkable concealment depends upon a body shaped by countless generations of life within shifting sediment. The skull is unusually broad and flattened, allowing the upper surface to merge naturally with the surrounding floor. Behind it, the body remains robust yet compressed, minimizing the height that would otherwise create a visible outline. Across the skin, irregular patterns of brown, gray, and black mirror the scattered colors of sand, shell fragments, and weathered gravel. No two patches appear exactly alike, yet together they dissolve the boundaries that normally reveal the presence of a living creature. Another layer of this design lies in the distribution of those colors. Like many marine animals, the stargazer displays countershading. The upper surface carries darker pigmentation, while the underside remains much lighter. This arrangement softens the visual contrast between body and surroundings from different viewing angles, making edges more difficult to distinguish whenever part of the fish becomes exposed. Instead of presenting a clear silhouette, the body blends gradually into the changing patterns of light and shadow that drift across the seafloor throughout the day. Beneath that patterned skin rests an equally important adaptation. The skull is reinforced with dense cranial bones, capable of enduring repeated burial beneath coarse sediment. Sand is far from gentle when carried by waves and currents, and each grain becomes another tiny point of abrasion. Over years of repeated burial and emergence, these strengthened bones shield the delicate sensory organs enclosed within the head, allowing the fish to perform the same behavior again and again without compromising the structures upon which its survival depends. This arrangement reaches beyond ordinary camouflage. Many animals survive by resembling leaves, stones, or drifting algae. They remain recognizable objects that imitate something else. The stargazer follows another path entirely. Once buried, it no longer presents itself as an object waiting to be discovered. The surrounding substrate continues across its body without interruption, leaving almost no visual boundary for another animal to interpret. The distinction is subtle, yet profoundly important. A passing fish does not evaluate the possibility of danger because there appears to be nothing separate from the ground beneath it. There is no outline demanding attention, no unfamiliar form inviting caution, no shape that experience can classify as predator. What exists instead is simply the seafloor itself, unchanged in appearance, waiting with extraordinary patience beneath the drifting water above. Hidden beneath its covering of sediment, the stargazer possesses another adaptation that seems almost impossible until it is observed closely. From the floor of its mouth, many species within the genus Uranoscopus produce a small extension of living flesh shaped with remarkable similarity to a marine worm. It is not an unwanted growth, nor a parasite, nor an accident of development. It is part of the fish itself, nourished by the same blood, built from the same tissues, and moved with deliberate precision by its own muscles. When the body has settled beneath the substrate, and every visible outline has dissolved into the surrounding seafloor, the mouth opens only a fraction. From that narrow opening, the fleshy appendage rises into the water above. It bends, curls, twitches, and undulates with subtle variations that resemble the movements of a vulnerable animal searching for food or struggling against the current. Nothing about its motion appears mechanical. Every shift carries the irregular rhythm of living prey. To a passing fish or wandering crustacean, the scene presents no obvious danger. There is only an inviting meal suspended above what appears to be an ordinary stretch of sand. Countless small predators spend their lives searching for opportunities exactly like this. Energy is precious beneath the waves, and an exposed worm offers nourishment without the cost of a lengthy pursuit. The invitation is accepted because nothing in the surrounding landscape suggests another possibility. The remarkable detail lies not only in the existence of the lure, but in the control behind it. The stargazer does not rely upon drifting currents to animate the appendage. It can alter every movement according to circumstance. Gentle motions may continue for long periods, suggesting an undisturbed animal feeding along the bottom. At other moments, the lure becomes more animated, increasing its twisting and pulsing until it resembles prey attempting to escape. The performance changes from one encounter to the next, shaped by muscular control rather than chance. This behavior places the stargazer among a remarkably uncommon group of predators that practice active luring. Instead of waiting for fortune alone, these hunters manipulate the expectations of other animals. They present information that appears trustworthy while concealing the reality beneath it. The prey does not simply wander into danger through accident. It arrives because every available signal encourages it to move closer. Another marine predator reached a strikingly similar solution through an entirely separate evolutionary history. The anglerfish carries a luminous structure extending from the head, glowing in the darkness of deeper waters where sunlight never reaches. Although the two lineages share no close relationship and evolved millions of years apart, both transformed part of their own anatomy into an irresistible invitation. One relies upon living flesh shaped like prey. The other relies upon light produced within the body itself. Different materials achieve the same biological purpose. The deception lasts only until the final instant. As the approaching animal crosses the narrow boundary, separating safety from capture, the lure disappears. It slips back inside the mouth with remarkable speed, never becoming part of the meal it was pretending to be. The decoy survives because it belongs to the hunter rather than the victim. There is something deeply elegant in this arrangement. The stargazer invests almost no energy pursuing another creature across the seafloor. Instead, it creates a convincing story, one told entirely through movement. Every gentle twitch suggests opportunity. Every pulse reinforces the illusion. The surrounding substrate provides the stage, the living appendage performs the role, and another animal completes the narrative by believing what it has seen. The hunt succeeds not through strength alone, but through the careful construction of a reality that exists only long enough to bring life within reach of waiting jaws. There comes a moment when the carefully crafted illusion reaches its final breath. The approaching animal has accepted every signal placed before it, drifting closer without haste, unaware that the distance separating curiosity from capture has almost disappeared. From this point onward, events unfold at a pace beyond ordinary perception, ending before conscious awareness could ever assemble the sequence into a complete picture. The entire strike lasts less than 60 milliseconds. Human consciousness generally requires between 100 and 150 milliseconds to recognize an unexpected event and begin forming a deliberate response. By the time such awareness could emerge, the encounter has already ended. Cause and consequence merge into a single instant, leaving no meaningful opportunity for escape once the invisible boundary has been crossed. The movement begins just behind the head. Powerful muscles contract with astonishing force, bending the front portion of the body through an angle greater than 60 degrees. Rather than driving the fish forward in pursuit, this contraction stores mechanical energy within the feeding apparatus, much like a tightly compressed spring waiting for release. Energy that had remained hidden beneath the stillness of the buried body suddenly becomes concentrated into a single, explosive motion. That stored force propels the upper jaw forward with extraordinary speed. Unlike the fixed jaws of many familiar vertebrates, the stargazer possesses a highly mobile feeding mechanism capable of projecting outward during the strike. The mouth extends toward the approaching prey even as the body itself remains largely anchored beneath the surrounding sediment. Distance that once seemed protective vanishes almost instantly. At precisely the same moment, the mouth opens wide. The cavity within expands so rapidly that the pressure inside falls below that of the surrounding water. Physics immediately responds. Water rushes inward to equalize the pressure difference, carrying with it everything suspended in that narrow volume. Tiny fish, crustaceans, drifting particles, and the very lure that moments earlier performed its careful deception all move toward the center of the expanding mouth. The lure withdraws safely as the prey continues forward, swept along by forces it cannot resist. This method of hunting is known as suction feeding, one of the most widespread predatory strategies among bony fishes throughout the world's oceans, lakes, and rivers. Yet, the stargazer applies it in an unusually refined form. There is no visible chase across open water, no gradual acceleration announcing pursuit, and no warning carried through the surrounding environment. The strike begins from complete concealment, allowing fluid dynamics rather than prolonged pursuit to complete the capture. For the prey, the experience is almost beyond the limits of its own nervous system. Neural signals require measurable time to travel from sensory organs to the brain before coordinated escape movements can begin. During that brief interval, the animal has already been drawn into the rapidly expanding flow of water. The body enters the mouth before the nervous system has completed the first stages of interpreting what has changed. Each adaptation described so far joins seamlessly with the next, forming an almost perfectly enclosed sequence. Concealment prevents recognition. The living lure encourages approach. Suction feeding transforms proximity into capture through the unavoidable behavior of moving water. The victim arrives through its own decision, guided by carefully presented information, then becomes subject to physical forces that allow virtually no chance of reversal. The same muscular mechanism also serves another purpose when circumstances change unexpectedly. If something larger disturbs the buried fish by digging into the substrate or attempting to uncover it, the explosive contraction can produce a sudden burst of movement that disrupts the encounter before additional defenses become necessary. In those rare moments, motion itself becomes the first response, creating an instant of confusion before other protective systems assume their role. What emerges is a hunting strategy built not upon pursuit, but upon timing so exact that the final act occupies less time than the closing of a human eyelid, completing a sequence written long before the approaching animal ever realized it had entered the stage. Buried beneath layers of sediment, another transformation waits inside the Stargazer, one that cannot be seen from the surface even after the fish has been uncovered. Hidden within the skull, directly behind the upward-facing eyes, lies one of the most unusual organs found in any vertebrate. It is an electric organ capable of producing discharges approaching 50 volts, not as a constant current flowing through the body, but as carefully timed bursts released only when circumstances demand them. Among species belonging to the genus Astroscopus, this remarkable organ did not appear from entirely new biological material. Evolution borrowed tissue that already existed. The muscles originally responsible for making the eyes rotate with extraordinary precision gradually acquired a different purpose across countless generations. Instead of producing movement alone, they became specialized electrical structures, converting biological energy into sudden pulses capable of influencing the water beyond the fish itself. The position of the organ is as deliberate as its origin. Rather than extending along the body, it occupies a vertical arrangement within the head. When the discharge occurs, the electrical field projects upward through the water column immediately above the buried fish. That is the very region where curious prey approaches, where scavengers investigate unfamiliar disturbances, and where larger animals may attempt to uncover what lies beneath the substrate. The weapon points toward the only direction that truly matters. Its output is not fixed. During an encounter with suitable prey, weaker electrical discharges may be sufficient to interfere with muscular coordination for an instant, increasing the effectiveness of the strike, already guided by concealment and fluid motion. Against a larger intruder attempting to dig the fish from its resting place, the organ can produce substantially stronger bursts intended to discourage further contact. The same structure serves different purposes according to the challenge unfolding above. Equally remarkable is the restraint with which it operates. The electric organ does not remain active throughout the day, filling the surrounding water with continuous pulses. Like every costly adaptation in biology, it is used selectively. The fish releases electricity only when the situation justifies the energetic expense. Between those moments, the organ waits in readiness, conserving resources until another carefully chosen discharge becomes worthwhile. Although the body itself remains almost completely concealed beneath the substrate, the electrical field extends beyond the visible boundaries of the fish. Water conducts electricity far more effectively than air, allowing the discharge to spread into the surrounding environment. This means the influence of the stargazer reaches farther than its buried form suggests. Another animal may enter that invisible field before coming close enough to distinguish any physical feature of the predator beneath. In that sense, the effective hunting space becomes larger than the body occupying it. The fish no longer depends solely upon the narrow outline hidden beneath sediment. Its influence reaches outward into nearby water, expanding the zone within which another creature may suddenly encounter one of its defenses. The predator occupies more biological territory than its physical dimensions alone would ever reveal. What makes this arrangement especially remarkable is the way it joins the systems already carried by the stargazer. Concealment removes visual recognition. The living lure shapes another animal's behavior. Electricity reaches into the surrounding water before direct contact occurs. Each operates independently, yet together they create overlapping layers of protection and predation, each becoming useful under different circumstances and at different distances from the buried fish. Across the marine world, venomous animals exist, electric fishes exist, masters of concealment exist. Yet no other documented marine animal combines these three separate systems within a single body, assembling them into one remarkably compact predator whose greatest strength lies not in any individual adaptation, but in the extraordinary way those adaptations work together. Even after concealment, deception, and electricity have done everything they can, the stargazer keeps one final safeguard in reserve. It waits along the edges of the body, almost unnoticed, until another animal has already committed itself beyond the point of retreat. Unlike the earlier adaptations, this one is not designed to begin an encounter. It exists for the moment when every other layer of protection has failed. Just above the broad pectoral fins, immediately behind the gill covers, stand two sturdy venomous spines. Their position is deliberate. An approaching predator attempting to seize the fish from above or swallow it whole inevitably presses against this region first. The spines remain folded into the body's profile during ordinary life, becoming dangerous only when pressure from another animal forces the encounter into direct contact. The venom itself is a protein-based toxin carried not through hollow needles resembling the fangs of a snake, but along grooves running the length of each spine. When the spine pierces flesh, the toxin flows across its surface and enters the wound naturally through the damaged tissue. The delivery system is elegantly simple, relying upon contact rather than injection. The fish does not need to thrust the spine forward or deliberately stab an attacker. The attacker's own movement completes the process. For mammals, the effects begin almost immediately. Intense pain develops around the puncture site within moments, followed by rapid swelling as surrounding tissues respond to the injury. Damage to nearby cells adds another layer of trauma, while the nervous system carries pain signals well beyond the original wound. The discomfort often radiates through surrounding muscles and joints, creating an experience far greater than the small puncture alone would suggest. Remarkably, none of this venom participates in the hunt itself. The stargazer does not poison the fish and crustaceans it captures. It does not threaten passing animals with raised spines or aggressive displays. Prey enters the mouth through entirely different mechanisms, leaving the venom untouched. Its purpose begins only after another creature has attempted to bite, grasp, or consume the stargazer. In every meaningful sense, it is a defensive adaptation rather than an offensive one. This distinction reveals something important about the fish's way of life. An animal that spends much of its existence resting beneath sediment cannot depend upon rapid escape once discovered. If concealment fails, there may be little opportunity to flee. The venom therefore serves as a final barrier against predators already committed to an attack. A larger fish, attempting to swallow the stargazer, encounters the spines during the act itself, transforming what seemed an easy meal into an unexpectedly painful mistake. Another unusual property makes the toxin scientifically interesting. The proteins responsible for its harmful effects lose their structure when exposed to sufficient heat. As those proteins unfold, they can no longer function as venom. This is why properly cooked stargazer flesh becomes safe to eat despite the dangerous defenses carried by the living fish. The same characteristic explains why immersing a sting in hot water is widely recommended as an important first aid measure, since heat helps disable the toxic proteins while medical evaluation addresses the injury itself. Comparisons often arise with the stonefish, widely regarded as the most dangerous venomous fish in the ocean. In terms of venom alone, the stonefish possesses the more powerful weapon, capable of causing far more severe consequences for humans. Yet the comparison becomes more interesting when viewed through the broader architecture of survival. The stonefish depends primarily upon camouflage and venom. It possesses neither an electric organ nor a living lure capable of shaping another animal's behavior before contact ever occurs. The stargazer, therefore, occupies an unusual place among marine predators. It does not hold the greatest record in any single category of defense or attack. Instead, its distinction comes from accumulation. Concealment, deception, electricity, and venom exist together within one remarkably compact body, each addressing a different danger, each ready for a different moment, forming one of the most comprehensively equipped survival strategies found anywhere beneath the sea. Beneath the weight of the seafloor, another challenge emerges, one that every buried animal must solve before it can remain hidden for more than a fleeting moment. Predators require oxygen just as surely as the creatures they pursue, yet an entire body packed beneath sediment leaves very little opportunity for ordinary breathing. The stargazer answers that problem with an arrangement unlike that of most other fishes, turning the upper surface of its head into a carefully organized gateway through which life continues without revealing the hunter below. Most fishes breathe by drawing water through the mouth before passing it across the delicate gills, where dissolved oxygen enters the bloodstream and carbon dioxide leaves it. That familiar pattern works well for an animal swimming freely through open water, but it becomes impractical for a fish resting face upward beneath sand. Opening the mouth repeatedly would disturb the surrounding sediment, exposing the very presence the stargazer depends upon concealing. Instead, the stargazer relies primarily upon its nostrils. This unusual respiratory pathway is made possible by specialized anatomy that allows water to enter through openings positioned on the upper surface of the head rather than through the mouth itself. While the jaws remain almost completely still beneath the substrate, the flow of oxygen-rich seawater continues uninterrupted, sustaining the fish without requiring the movements that would otherwise betray its location. Around both the nostrils and the margin of the mouth grow delicate, fleshy fringes that perform another essential task. These structures act as natural filters, admitting water while excluding grains of sand carried by shifting currents. Their arrangement resembles an intricate biological screen, preventing sediment from clogging the passages even as the fish remains surrounded on nearly every side by loose particles. Countless tiny grains slide across the surface without reaching the sensitive respiratory tissues beneath. From there, the incoming water follows a carefully directed route. It enters through the nostrils and additional openings positioned along the upper portion of the skull. It then passes smoothly across the gills, where oxygen exchange takes place, before leaving through the operculum, the protective gill covers situated along the sides of the head. The pathway moves in one direction only, maintaining a continuous circulation that supports the fish even while the rest of the body remains hidden beneath the substrate. This one-way flow offers another remarkable advantage. Because water follows an organized internal route, the fish avoids producing the obvious disturbances associated with repeated mouth movements. There is no shifting cloud of sediment above the head, no visible current spreading across the surface, and no ripple suggesting that a living animal lies beneath. Every breath becomes another act of concealment, preserving the illusion that nothing exists below except ordinary sand. The skull itself reflects this extraordinary level of specialization. Earlier adaptations shaped it for concealment, protection, and the careful observation of passing life overhead. Yet those same broad surfaces also support the respiratory system, placing the necessary openings where they remain accessible even after the rest of the body has disappeared beneath sediment. Vision, defense, and respiration occupy the same architectural framework, each reinforcing the others instead of competing for space. What emerges is not a collection of isolated adaptations, but a single integrated design in which every structure serves several purposes at once. The upper surface of the head becomes a landscape of remarkable efficiency, allowing the fish to observe, breathe, and remain concealed through the same carefully arranged features. Little energy is wasted, and almost nothing interrupts the seamless appearance of the surrounding seafloor. The result is an animal that remains fully alive beneath layers of sand, while giving almost no outward indication of its presence. Blood continues to circulate. Oxygen continues to pass through the gills. Every cell remains active, yet the world above receives almost no evidence that another living creature occupies the ground below. To passing prey, the seafloor retains the appearance of lifeless terrain, even as one of the ocean's most patient predators continues breathing beneath it. Among all the remarkable features carried by the Stargazer, there is one detail that continues to draw unusual attention from evolutionary biologists. It is not the presence of electricity alone that makes this fish exceptional. Rather, it is the surprising absence of something that almost every other electric fish possesses alongside it. The Stargazer learned how to generate electricity, yet never evolved the ability to perceive the electrical world surrounding it. Throughout freshwater rivers and marine habitats, the familiar electric fishes follow a different pattern. The electric eel, the torpedo ray, the elephant fish, and the black ghost knifefish all combine two related abilities within the same body. They produce electrical fields through the process known as bioelectrogenesis, while also carrying specialized sensory organs capable of detecting electrical signals in the surrounding environment. Those two abilities work together, forming an integrated system through which the fish can communicate, navigate, locate hidden prey, and interpret nearby movement even when vision becomes unreliable. The accepted evolutionary pathway reflects that partnership. Scientists believe electroreception, the ability to detect natural electrical fields, generally appears before powerful electric organs evolve. Once an animal begins sensing weak electrical signals produced by muscles and nerves in nearby organisms, natural selection can gradually favor stronger internal electrical discharges. Over immense spans of evolutionary time, a sensory adaptation becomes the foundation for a much more powerful biological weapon. The Stargazer followed no such sequence. Somewhere along its own evolutionary history, the familiar first step simply never appeared. No specialized electroreceptors developed across its skin. No hidden sensory network emerged to interpret the electrical patterns moving through seawater. The fish cannot detect the faint currents produced by nearby animals, cannot navigate by reading electrical disturbances, and cannot perceive the discharge from its own electric organ after it has entered the surrounding water. Instead, the organ evolved for a single purpose. Electricity became neither a language nor a compass. It never became an extension of perception. It exists only as a practical instrument for stunning prey and discouraging predators. The electrical discharge begins and ends as a weapon, stripped of every additional role that similar organs perform in other lineages of electric fishes. That separation makes the Stargazer one of the most intriguing natural exceptions known in vertebrate biology. In nearly every other documented case, electrical generation and electrical perception remain inseparable partners, each reinforcing the value of the other. Here, evolution reached an entirely different outcome. One half of the familiar system appeared without the other, producing an animal equipped with electrical power but almost completely unaware of the invisible electrical landscape surrounding it. For researchers, this unusual arrangement offers an extraordinary opportunity. Because the sensory and electrical systems already exist independently through natural evolution, the Stargazer provides a living comparison unavailable in most other species. Scientists studying electric organs can examine how biological electricity develops, functions, and influences behavior when it serves no communicative or sensory role at all. In effect, evolution has already performed an experiment that researchers could never recreate across millions of years. The implications extend well beyond a single fish resting beneath coastal sediment. Evolution is often described as following recognizable pathways, building new structures by modifying older ones in predictable sequences. The Stargazer reminds us that those pathways are not absolute rules. Under the right circumstances, natural selection may bypass familiar stages entirely, arriving at solutions that appear almost contradictory when viewed beside every other known example. Its electrical organ, therefore, represents more than another remarkable adaptation. It stands as evidence that life occasionally discovers an unexpected route through evolutionary possibility, preserving only the pieces required for survival while leaving the rest behind. In the buried stillness of the Stargazer, electricity exists without perception, power without awareness, a singular design shaped with remarkable economy, revealing that nature sometimes writes its most fascinating stories by omitting what almost every other lineage considered essential. Within the Stargazer family, electricity tells not one evolutionary story, but two. Beneath outward similarities that make these fishes appear almost interchangeable, a remarkable divergence unfolded over immense spans of time. Closely related animals, sharing the same buried existence, the same upward gaze, and the same patient method of hunting, arrived at the same extraordinary weapon by transforming entirely different parts of their own bodies. Among members of the genus Uranoscopus, the electric organ develops from muscles that once served another purpose altogether. These ancestral muscles originally produced sound, subtle contractions that generated vibrations within the surrounding water. Across countless generations, those tissues gradually lost their original function. Instead of creating movement that could be heard, they became specialized for producing electrical discharge, their cells reshaped into biological structures capable of releasing current into the water above. The genus Astroscopus reached the same destination by another route. Its electric organ originated from modified eye muscles, the very tissues that normally guide the delicate rotations of the eyeballs. Muscles designed for precise visual adjustment slowly acquired an entirely different role. Layer by layer, their cells became electrocytes, specialized living batteries arranged to generate electrical pulses whenever the fish required them. The original purpose faded while a new one emerged, demonstrating how evolution often builds remarkable innovations from structures already present within the body. Despite this profound internal difference, these fishes remain unmistakably close relatives. They belong to the same family. Their broad heads still press beneath loose sediment. Their upward-facing eyes continue watching the narrow strip of water overhead. Their concealed mouths wait beneath the surface with unwavering patience. Their shared body plan reveals a common ancestry, yet hidden inside their skulls, two independent evolutionary histories quietly coexist. That independence carries unusual scientific significance. The electric organs found in Uranoscopus and Astroscopus did not arise from a single ancestral electric organ inherited by every descendant. Instead, biological electricity emerged twice within the same family, each origin beginning with different tissues, following different developmental pathways, and arriving at remarkably similar functional results. Evolution repeated one of its most complex inventions without simply copying its earlier work. The pattern becomes even more remarkable when viewed across the wider history of fishes. The ability to generate biological electricity, known as bioelectrogenesis, has appeared independently at least 8 separate times among fish lineages scattered across the evolutionary tree. Those origins occurred in animals separated by enormous spans of time, living in different habitats, pursuing different prey, and facing different ecological pressures. Each lineage recruited its own available tissues, reshaping ordinary muscle into electrocytes capable of producing controlled electrical discharge. Yet beneath those separate origins lies another layer of unity. Although each lineage began with different biological materials, the molecular machinery responsible for generating electrical current repeatedly relies upon the same general family of voltage-gated sodium channel proteins. These proteins regulate the movement of electrically charged particles across cellular membranes, allowing electrocytes to produce coordinated bursts of current. Different evolutionary journeys repeatedly converged upon the same fundamental molecular solution, suggesting that certain biological possibilities remain especially effective whenever electricity becomes advantageous. The Stargazer family, therefore, occupies a remarkable place within this broader pattern. Out of the relatively few documented origins of biological electricity among fishes, this single family accounts for 2 independent examples. It demonstrates both the creativity and the consistency of natural selection. Evolution explored separate routes through different muscles, different developmental histories, and different genetic changes, yet repeatedly discovered an effective means of turning ordinary living tissue into an electrical weapon. Seen from above, a buried stargazer appears almost inseparable from the surrounding seafloor. Hidden beneath that ordinary surface rests evidence that evolution sometimes solves the same challenge more than once, shaping different beginnings toward the same destination, until entirely separate histories produce remarkably similar sparks beneath the sand. Long before the modern shoreline settled into its familiar shape, before many living marine communities had fully emerged, the Stargazer had already arrived at an answer that would endure across immense stretches of geological time. Its story reaches into an ancient ocean whose coastlines differed, whose currents followed unfamiliar paths, and whose waters carried creatures that have long since vanished. Even there, the essential outline of this remarkable predator had already taken form. The earliest confirmed fossil belonging to the Stargazer family was discovered among the celebrated cliffs of Calvert Cliffs in the state of Maryland, a coastline renowned for preserving marine life from the Miocene epoch with exceptional clarity. Layer after layer of ancient sediment has yielded shells, teeth, bones, and traces of vanished seas. Among those discoveries rests a fragment that speaks with surprising confidence about an animal whose greatest adaptations are concentrated within a single remarkable skull. The fossil species received the scientific name Astroscopus countermani. Geological dating places it at approximately 11 million years in age, during the Tortonian stage of the Miocene epoch. Although only the cranial remains have been preserved, the absence of the rest of the skeleton reveals far less than it might in another fish. For a stargazer, the head contains the blueprint. The flattened upper surface, the upward-facing arrangement of the eyes, and the distinctive proportions of the skull already display the architectural pattern that continues among living relatives today. Those preserved bones reveal another subtle detail. The region between the eye sockets, known as the interorbital portion of the skull, appears proportionally larger than the corresponding structure found in modern electric stargazers. That region houses the electric organ in living species. Its unusual proportions suggest that this ancient animal may have possessed an electrical system that had not yet reached the refinement observed in its descendants. Rather than representing a fully modern condition, the fossil may preserve an intermediate stage, a moment during which one of nature's most unusual weapons was still progressing through evolutionary change. Such discoveries are especially valuable because the environments favored by stargazers rarely preserve delicate remains. Sandy seafloors are constantly reshaped by waves, currents, burrowing animals, and shifting sediment. Fish skeletons are lightweight and fragile, while soft tissues disappear rapidly after death. Every fossil recovered from these habitats survives against considerable odds. Each specimen, therefore, represents only a small glimpse into a history that almost certainly extends much farther into the past than the rocks currently reveal. The world surrounding that ancient stargazer differed substantially from today's oceans. Global sea levels stood at different heights. Marine temperatures were generally warmer than those of the present era. The Mediterranean occupied a different geological configuration, and countless coastlines looked unfamiliar by modern standards. Entire marine ecosystems assembled themselves according to environmental conditions that have since transformed through millions of years of climatic change. Yet within those shifting surroundings, the underlying design of the stargazer already proved remarkably effective. Its upward-directed anatomy persisted. Its flattened skull remained suited to concealment beneath loose sediment. The fundamental organization of its body required remarkably little alteration despite profound environmental changes unfolding around it. Entire communities of marine organisms appeared, diversified, and disappeared, while this concealed hunter retained the same essential strategy. The confirmed fossil record, therefore, establishes only a minimum age of approximately 11 million years for the family, not its true beginning. The actual origin almost certainly lies deeper in time, concealed within sediments that never preserved the evidence, or within rocks that have yet to surrender their secrets. By the time this fossil animal entered the geological record, the blueprint had already matured into an exceptionally successful design. Evolution rarely preserves complexity without constant testing. Across changing climates, rising and falling seas, and the gradual reshaping of the oceans themselves, the Stargazer continued answering the same ecological challenge with almost the same body. Some designs invite endless revision. Others become so well matched to their purpose that time itself finds remarkably little to improve. Every buried hunter begins somewhere else, before the sand, before the concealed gaze, before the patient stillness that defines its adult existence. The Stargazer passes through a chapter that seems almost impossible to reconcile with the creature it eventually becomes. Its earliest days belong not to the seafloor, but to the open sea, where concealment is impossible and survival depends upon an entirely different set of conditions. Reproduction takes place close to the bottom during late spring and early summer. Adult stargazers release countless small, transparent eggs into the surrounding water, and buoyancy carries them upward through the water column. Rather than remaining near the seabed where their parents spend nearly every hour of adult life, these fragile beginnings drift toward the brighter surface layers, surrendering themselves to currents that neither parent will ever follow. When the eggs hatch, the young bear almost no resemblance to the broad-headed ambush predator waiting beneath the sand. The larvae are transparent, delicate, and nearly invisible against the surrounding water. Sunlight passes through their tiny bodies. They possess no shelter, no sediment to disappear into, no electric defense ready for use, and none of the elaborate concealment that defines adulthood. Their entire world consists of open water stretching in every direction, carried wherever tides and currents decide to take them. This drifting stage exposes them to countless dangers, yet it also allows them to spread across broad coastal habitats before settling into permanent territories. Instead of remaining clustered near the spawning grounds, the larvae become travelers, almost by accident, dispersed through the upper ocean long before they acquire the body built for life upon the bottom. As development continues, another remarkable transformation begins. Once the nourishing yolk sac has been completely consumed at a body length of approximately 6 to 7 millimeters, the young fish must secure food for themselves. Their first meals consist of other drifting larvae inhabiting the same waters. Scientific records document that these meals sometimes include members of their own species. Cannibalism appears astonishingly early in the life of the stargazer, emerging before the animal has ever touched the seafloor or deployed any of the sophisticated hunting strategies that later define its existence. Growth gradually replaces transparency with pigment. Dark coloration spreads across the developing body, reducing the glass-like appearance that once concealed the tiny fish within open water. Soon afterward, a vivid yellow spot appears beneath the chin, a developmental marker recorded in both northern and southern stargazer species. This small feature signals that the drifting larva is approaching another profound transition, one that reshapes far more than outward appearance. At a body length of approximately 12 to 15 millimeters, the electric organs begin to develop. Even while suspended within the open water column, the young fish starts assembling one of its most extraordinary biological systems. Long before burial beneath sediment, long before the concealed strike and the upward discharge into approaching prey, the foundations of biological electricity are already taking shape inside its growing body. Evolution prepares the weapon before the battlefield ever appears. Only after this period does the descent begin. The young stargazer gradually abandons the open water that carried it through its earliest existence and settles toward the seabed. There, the transformation reaches its final stage. The flattened head becomes suited for concealment beneath loose sediment. The upward-facing eyes assume their permanent orientation. The patient rhythm that has echoed throughout the species for millions of years finally emerges. The contrast could scarcely be greater. A creature that began as a transparent drifter beneath the bright surface becomes an animal almost impossible to distinguish from the seafloor below. The restless movement of the currents gives way to deliberate stillness. The exposed juvenile enters a life devoted to concealment. From that point onward, the upward light remains the same, but it is viewed through a narrow opening in the sand, where the fully armed stargazer waits with the enduring confidence of a design refined across deep time. Long before the young stargazer settles into the sand that will define the rest of its existence, another transformation has already begun beneath its skin. Hidden within a drifting body, scarcely recognizable as the formidable adult to come, a remarkable organ starts taking shape. Among the many peculiar details in the biology of this family, the timing of that development stands apart as one of the most revealing. The electric organ begins forming when the larva reaches approximately 12 to 15 millimeters in length. At that moment, the animal is still suspended within the open water column, carried by currents rather than anchored to the seafloor. It has never buried itself beneath sediment. It has never waited beneath passing prey. It has never occupied the concealed position for which its adult body appears so perfectly designed. Yet the foundations of biological electricity are already being assembled. The contrast is striking. At this stage, the young fish possesses none of the elaborate defenses that later work together with such precision. Its venomous spines have not yet developed into the effective protective structures carried by mature individuals. Its camouflage remains incomplete, with the body still transitioning from youthful transparency toward darker pigmentation. The familiar flattened profile, suited for concealment, has not fully emerged. It remains a small, darkening, partly translucent creature exposed within open water, vulnerable to predators approaching from every direction. Even so, electricity comes first. Developmental biology offers more than one possible explanation for this sequence. One possibility suggests that the earliest electrical discharges already provide practical value while the larva remains adrift. Even a modest burst of current, delivered unexpectedly into surrounding water, could discourage a predator attempting to seize such a small animal. At a stage when armor, concealment, and venom remain unavailable, electricity may represent the earliest meaningful layer of protection, providing a brief but valuable opportunity for escape from an otherwise overwhelming threat. Another explanation approaches the question from an entirely different perspective. Rather than responding directly to the environment, the electric organ may simply follow a deeply embedded developmental program written into the species through countless generations of evolution. Once the larva reaches a particular body size, the genetic instructions responsible for constructing the electric organ begin operating. Regardless of whether the young fish still drifts through open water or has already begun descending toward the bottom. In this interpretation, the schedule follows internal biological timing rather than external habitat. Growth itself becomes the signal. Although these possibilities differ in their underlying mechanisms, both point toward the same broader conclusion. The stargazer does not acquire electricity because it has already become a buried ambush predator. The weapon appears before that way of life begins. Its electrical system is not a response to living beneath the sand. Instead, the animal reaches the seafloor, carrying that remarkable capability with it, already prepared for the environment it is about to enter. This order of development invites a deeper reflection upon the history of the family itself. The sequence suggests that electricity may represent the earliest established weapon within the Stargazer lineage, the feature secured first through natural selection, while other adaptations accumulated around it across immense spans of evolutionary time. Burial beneath sediment, specialized camouflage, the deceptive lure, and venomous spines may each have been added to an already successful foundation, strengthening a strategy that had begun with electrical defense long before the complete adult body plan emerged. By the time the young stargazer finally descends from the drifting world above and settles into the waiting seafloor, it does not arrive empty-handed. The first of its remarkable defenses has already awakened within its growing body. Everything that follows seems less like the beginning of a new existence than the completion of a design that had been unfolding since the earliest moments of its life. Across coastlines, separated by entire oceans, the same patient design waits beneath the sand. It appears beneath warm Atlantic waves, along broad Pacific shores, across the Indian Ocean, within the enclosed waters of the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea, and the Red Sea. Few predatory fish families have achieved such an extraordinary geographic reach. The Stargazer family has spread across nearly every major region where warm marine waters meet soft sediment, establishing itself with remarkable consistency despite the immense distances between these habitats. Only the polar oceans remain beyond its range. There, falling water temperatures reshape entire food webs, reducing the abundance of the small fishes and crustaceans upon which stargazers depend. Their bodies are also adapted for warmer conditions, and the demands of metabolism in freezing seas place limits that this family has never crossed. The boundary is drawn not by continents or currents alone, but by the living communities capable of sustaining such a specialized hunter. Within the Mediterranean Sea, one species in particular has become a familiar presence to those working along the seafloor. The common stargazer appears regularly in bottom trawl catches, contributing approximately 2.6% of the total catch in parts of the Western Mediterranean. Although rarely sought as a primary commercial species, it sometimes reaches local fish markets alongside many other fishes gathered from sandy bottoms. For generations, fishermen have encountered this unusual predator without always realizing how remarkable its biology truly is beneath its unassuming appearance. Far across the Atlantic Ocean, members of the genus known for electrical discharge occupy an equally impressive range. They inhabit coastal waters extending from the shores of New York southward to Brazil. Settling anywhere suitable stretches of sand or mud provide the conditions required for concealment. On the opposite side of the world, related species belonging to another lineage occupy an immense portion of the Indo-Pacific region, extending from the waters surrounding Japan to the coastlines of Australia. Despite these vast geographic separations, the same fundamental strategy persists with remarkable fidelity. Their vertical range is equally impressive. Some individuals occupy the intertidal zone, living where only a few inches of seawater cover the sand during rising tides. Others descend to depths approaching 400 meters, which is about 1,312 feet. That is nearly 400 meters, continuing the same buried existence beneath dramatically different conditions of light and pressure. Throughout that broad span, the essential blueprint remains recognizable, demonstrating how effectively the design functions across diverse marine environments. Taken together, these observations reveal something almost astonishing in its simplicity. Anywhere warm coastal water settles over sandy or muddy seabeds, There is a genuine possibility that a stargazer rests beneath the surface at this very moment. Vast stretches of the world's inhabited coastline provide exactly the conditions this family requires. The animal itself remains hidden, but its presence has become woven into marine ecosystems across an extraordinary portion of the planet. Its worldwide distribution did not arise because adult stargazers undertook great migrations. Once established on the bottom, they remain closely tied to relatively small home areas. The true travelers belong to an entirely different stage of life. Transparent larvae drift within surface waters, carried by powerful ocean currents that flow across enormous marine basins. Without deliberate navigation, these fragile young are transported immense distances before eventually descending towards suitable habitat. Ocean circulation performs the work that the adult fish never attempts. The contrast completes one of the most elegant patterns in the natural history of the stargazer. The same creature that spends nearly all of its adult existence settled beneath a single patch of sand begins life surrendered to wandering currents. Crossing seas, it will never consciously explore again before finally becoming part of the seafloor that will define the rest of its days. Every defense has a boundary, not because it is poorly designed, but because evolution never creates an answer that defeats every challenge at once. For the stargazer, that boundary arrives in the form of an animal that hunts through an entirely different sense. The buried fish has assembled camouflage so complete that eyes passing overhead detect only an unbroken stretch of seabed. It carries venom for the moment of contact and electricity for the instant before escape becomes impossible. Yet all of those defenses were shaped for opponents searching with vision. The bottlenose dolphin belongs to another world of perception altogether. Among the confirmed natural predators of the stargazer, the bottlenose dolphin occupies a singular place. This is not simply a hunter consuming whatever happens to cross its path. Over countless generations, dolphins have refined techniques for locating prey concealed beneath sand and sediment. Their success depends upon an ability that transforms the underwater landscape into something far richer than a visual scene alone. Where another predator sees an uninterrupted bottom, the dolphin perceives hidden structure waiting beneath the surface. That remarkable ability is echolocation, a biological form of sonar produced by bursts of focused sound traveling outward through seawater. These sound waves continue into loose sediment before returning as echoes carrying detailed information about the objects they encounter. Every buried shell, every stone, every pocket of trapped gas, and every living body reflects those sound waves in slightly different ways. The returning echoes become an intricate map interpreted by the dolphin's highly specialized nervous system with extraordinary precision. A stargazer buried beneath the sand cannot disguise the physical composition of its body from sound. Bones possess densities unlike surrounding grains of sediment. Internal organs interrupt the otherwise uniform structure of the seabed. The swim bladder, containing gas rather than water, creates one of the strongest acoustic contrasts found within many fishes. Even though no visible outline remains at the surface, the hidden anatomy beneath reflects sound differently from the surrounding bottom. The disguise succeeds completely for vision while failing almost entirely against acoustic perception. In that instant, the foundation upon which the stargazer has invested millions of years of evolutionary refinement loses its greatest advantage. Camouflage depends upon an observer interpreting reflected light. The dolphin depends upon returning echoes. Coloration, stillness, and flawless burial no longer erase the predator from its surroundings, because the search itself no longer relies upon appearance. The fish remains concealed from sight while becoming distinguishable through sound. The remaining defenses still retain value. Should the dolphin begin extracting the buried fish, venomous spines may inflict painful wounds during the struggle. An electric discharge delivered at close range may produce a startling sensation capable of disrupting the attack for a brief moment. These systems continue to function exactly as evolution intended. What changes is the sequence of events leading to their use. Camouflage no longer prevents discovery. Instead, the confrontation advances directly toward the final defensive layers after detection has already occurred. The encounter represents an elegant meeting between two evolutionary arms races that developed independently across immense spans of time. One lineage perfected concealment against visually guided hunters inhabiting sandy seabeds. The other refined the interpretation of reflected sound until buried prey could no longer rely upon invisibility. Neither adaptation evolved specifically in response to the other, yet when they meet, the balance shifts decisively toward acoustic perception. There is something deeply revealing in that outcome. The Stargazer devoted immense evolutionary effort to disappearing from view, refining every contour of its skull, every pattern upon its skin, and every movement that allowed it to merge completely with the seafloor. The bottlenose dolphin simply does not require sight to uncover what lies beneath. It listens instead, and within those returning echoes, the hidden hunter becomes unmistakably present. Morning light spreads across the shallows, revealing nothing more remarkable than rippled sand beneath clear water. Small waves fold gently across the beach, and people wander through the surf with the easy confidence that comes from seeing every grain beneath their feet. Somewhere below that familiar landscape, another life waits with complete patience. It has no interest in pursuing passing swimmers, no instinct to chase them, and no reason to reveal itself. The encounter begins only when two paths happen to cross at the exact same place. The most common meeting between a human and a stargazer is entirely accidental. These fishes occupy the same sandy beaches, tidal flats, and coastal shallows that invite people to wade barefoot during calm days. Their bodies remain buried beneath the sediment, leaving only the uppermost portions of the head exposed. From above, there is almost nothing to distinguish the animal from the surrounding seabed. Even at very close range, the disguise remains astonishingly effective because the fish has become part of the landscape rather than an object resting upon it. As a person walks forward, the stargazer observes the approach with the same steady awareness it directs toward every movement crossing overhead. It neither flees nor prepares an attack against the intruder. Its hunting posture is unchanged, its body remaining beneath the sand until the final instant of physical contact. The walker notices only an ordinary stretch of bottom, then a foot presses downward into the hidden fish. What follows unfolds with startling speed. The pressure forces the venomous spines positioned above the broad pectoral fins upward into the sole of the foot or the lower ankle. Because the defensive system functions passively, the fish does not deliberately stab its attacker. The movement of the person activates the protection automatically. In species possessing electric organs, an electrical discharge may occur during the same encounter, producing a brief shock alongside the venomous puncture before the injured individual fully understands that contact has even occurred. Medical descriptions of these injuries are remarkably consistent. Pain begins immediately, becoming intense within moments. The protein-based venom triggers neurological pathways that spread discomfort well beyond the original puncture, creating radiating sensations extending through the surrounding tissues. Swelling often develops rapidly, accompanied by localized cellular damage where the spines entered the skin. Although the electrical discharge contributes an additional startling sensation, the lingering effects arise primarily from the venom itself. The accepted first response reflects the chemistry of the toxin rather than the mechanics of the wound. Immersing the injured area in the hottest water that can be safely tolerated helps break apart the delicate protein structure responsible for much of the venom's activity. Heat reduces the effectiveness of those proteins, often providing meaningful relief from pain. Even so, this measure addresses only the toxin. It does not cleanse the puncture, eliminate contamination, or remove the possibility of complications developing afterward. That remaining concern is significant because puncture wounds received in coastal seawater carry an elevated risk of bacterial infection. Marine shorelines contain extraordinarily rich communities of microscopic organisms, many of which readily enter damaged tissue. For that reason, professional medical evaluation remains important even when symptoms begin improving after heat treatment. Modern scientific literature contains no confirmed peer-reviewed fatalities attributed to Stargazer venom, yet serious injuries requiring hospital care have been documented repeatedly. Communities living beside the Mediterranean Sea, where the common Stargazer inhabits frequently visited shallows, gradually developed an elegantly simple response. Rather than lifting each foot and placing it down again, experienced swimmers and fishermen slide their feet gently across the sand. This movement disturbs buried fishes before full weight settles upon them, encouraging the hidden animal to shift away or revealing its presence without direct pressure upon the venomous spines. It is a modest adjustment, learned through generations, shaped by the existence of a fish that waits beneath the seafloor while watching the world above. Long after the encounter in the shallows has ended, another relationship between humans and the Stargazer unfolds far from the surf, beneath the awnings of coastal fish markets where unfamiliar catches rest upon beds of ice. Among fish shaped in ways that seem comfortably familiar, the Stargazer often appears almost unchanged from the life it left behind. Its broad head faces upward, its eyes remain fixed toward the sky, and its expression preserves the same peculiar gaze that served it throughout its years beneath the seafloor. Despite its formidable collection of defenses, the Stargazer has become part of regional cuisine in several parts of the world. Along the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, around portions of the Black Sea coast, and in Japan, fishermen occasionally bring these unusual fish ashore, where they are cleaned, prepared, and valued for firm, white flesh with a delicate texture. Although many people encountering the animal for the first time hesitate because of its unusual appearance, those familiar with local traditions recognize it as a respected food rather than a curiosity. Preparing a Stargazer demands knowledge as much as skill. The venom responsible for protecting the living fish is built from delicate proteins whose complex structure cannot withstand cooking temperatures. As heat spreads through the flesh, those proteins unravel and lose the biological form required to produce their harmful effects. By the time the fish reaches the table, the venom has been rendered inactive, leaving the meat entirely safe for consumption when it has been properly prepared. Another precaution concerns a feature that never appears on the finished plate. During cleaning, the electric organ is routinely removed because it offers no culinary value. In a freshly caught specimen that has not yet been processed, the organ may still retain enough biological activity to produce an electrical discharge if handled carelessly. The shock is generally brief, yet experienced fish processors prefer to eliminate the possibility altogether. Removing the organ has become an ordinary step, repeated so often that it passes almost unnoticed within communities accustomed to working with these remarkable animals. The venomous spines demand even greater respect because death does not immediately erase their defensive function. Freshly caught stargazers continue to carry active venom, and an unwary hand pressing against the hidden spines can receive essentially the same injury that would result from stepping upon a living fish beneath shallow water. Thick protective gloves, sturdy tools, and practiced handling techniques separate experienced workers from painful accidents. Familiarity has not bred carelessness. Instead, generations of experience have produced habits shaped by repeated encounters with an animal that continues defending itself even after capture. Among the species entering commercial markets, the common stargazer remains the best known. Conservation assessments currently classify it as a species of least concern, reflecting populations that remain broadly stable across much of its range. Even in regions supporting active fisheries, relatively few vessels seek it deliberately. Most individuals arrive in fishing ports as accidental captures, collected within bottom trawl nets intended for entirely different species resting upon or near the seabed. Its presence in the catch often reflects circumstance rather than pursuit. That pattern creates an understated symmetry between predator and fisherman. Throughout its adult life, the stargazer survives by constructing an illusion. It blends so completely into the surrounding sediment that passing prey mistake a concealed hunter for ordinary seafloor until the final instant. Human fishing methods reverse that relationship in an unexpected way. Vast nets sweep across the bottom without selecting one creature from another, gathering intended catches together with countless unintended ones. The stargazer, so carefully hidden from nearly every wandering animal above, becomes vulnerable not because its disguise has failed, but because the net never needed to recognize it in the first place. Within that exchange rests a gentle reminder that even the most specialized design eventually meets another shaped by entirely different purposes. Across the history of life beneath the waves, certain shapes appear with remarkable persistence. They emerge in distant branches of the evolutionary tree, separated by immense spans of time and ancestry, yet they arrive carrying solutions that seem strangely familiar. The stargazer belongs to one of those recurring designs, a reminder that the ocean often guides unrelated creatures toward similar destinations when they face the same enduring challenges. Life upon the seafloor rewards patience more generously than speed. Food passes overhead instead of across the horizon. Every burst of movement demands precious energy, while remaining concealed costs almost nothing once the proper body has evolved. Within these conditions, natural selection repeatedly favors broad heads pressed close to the sediment, upward-facing eyes, and bodies capable of disappearing into sand or mud until only the smallest trace remains visible. The flatfish followed that path through an entirely different transformation. Instead of preserving the ordinary arrangement of the skull, its developing body twists during growth until both eyes migrate onto the same side of the head. Resting upon one flank, the fish becomes nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding bottom. Although the final appearance resembles another ambush predator waiting beneath the sediment, every anatomical step leading there differs from the path taken by the stargazer. Another lineage reached a similar destination through yet another route. The stonefish settled against rocky and sandy bottoms with a body covered in irregular textures that imitate the surrounding landscape. Venomous spines stand ready across its back, discouraging anything large enough to attempt swallowing it. Yet, It possesses neither an active lure nor an electric organ. Camouflage and venom alone became sufficient for its way of life, demonstrating that comparable ecological pressures need not produce identical collections of adaptations. The monkfish represents another independent experiment. Flattened against the seafloor, it waits with extraordinary patience while extending a specialized lure into the water above. Curious prey approach the moving bait, unaware that the remainder of the animal blends almost seamlessly into the bottom. Once again, the strategy echoes familiar themes while emerging from a lineage unrelated to the Stargazer. Similar problems encouraged similar answers, even though the biological materials available to build those answers were entirely different. These repeated patterns illustrate one of the deepest principles in evolutionary biology: convergent evolution. Separate lineages encounter equivalent environmental demands, and natural selection gradually favors structures that solve those demands efficiently. The result is resemblance without close ancestry, a collection of organisms connected less by shared heritage than by shared circumstance. The ocean floor has become one of the clearest stages upon which this process unfolds, because its physical conditions remain remarkably consistent across vast regions of the world. Charles Darwin reflected upon this tendency in his work on the origin of species. When discussing electric fishes, he emphasized that natural selection can guide unrelated organisms toward comparable functional outcomes because they confront comparable challenges. The resemblance arises not from inheritance of the same specialized organ, but from countless generations discovering effective solutions through gradual modification. Evolution does not follow a predetermined blueprint, yet familiar pressures often narrow the range of successful possibilities. Within that larger pattern, the Stargazer occupies an unusually elaborate position. Many bottom-dwelling hunters rely upon a single, dominant adaptation, whether camouflage, venom, or a lure. The Stargazer accumulated layer after layer instead. Concealment remained. A lure appeared. Electricity emerged. Venom followed. Each addition strengthened an already successful foundation rather than replacing what came before, producing an animal whose defenses and hunting tools overlap instead of competing. Seen across millions of years, the seafloor resembles a patient sculptor shaping unrelated creatures toward recurring forms. Again and again, buried hunters emerge from separate histories carrying familiar silhouettes because the environment continues asking the same ancient question. The answers differ in detail, yet they settle upon the same enduring truth that beneath drifting sand, remaining unseen has long been among the most successful ways to survive. Beneath every stretch of open water lies another landscape of relationships, one built not from towering predators or vast migrations, but from countless small decisions repeated across generations. The Stargazer occupies a place near the summit of that hidden community. Although it spends much of its existence concealed beneath the sediment, its influence extends far beyond the few moments when it actually captures a meal. Ecologists place the Stargazer at approximately trophic level 4.4, positioning it among the higher predators within coastal seafloor ecosystems. Its diet consists primarily of fishes and crustaceans that move across sandy bottoms in search of food of their own. Every successful ambush removes another individual from populations that continue supporting larger ecological networks, creating effects that ripple outward through neighboring species in ways seldom noticed by human observers. Among the documented prey are several fishes that also hold commercial importance for coastal fisheries. Hake, Argentine fish, gobies, and pickerels all appear within the known diet of different stargazer species. While fishing vessels harvest these same animals for markets around the world, the buried predator has been regulating their numbers for far longer than any organized fishery has existed. Every concealed hunter participates in balancing populations, whether or not those interactions are included within human management plans. Yet, the influence of the stargazer extends beyond the prey it actually consumes. Generations of fishes crossing sandy seafloors have encountered predators that reveal themselves only during the final fraction of a second. Over immense stretches of evolutionary time, individuals that behaved with greater caution near exposed sediment survived more often than those that lingered carelessly. The descendants of those survivors inherited tendencies that now appear almost instinctive. They travel in schools that reduce the chance of any single individual becoming the target. They hesitate above certain bottom types. They pass quickly across exposed stretches where concealment for an ambush predator is most effective. None of these responses require memory of a particular encounter. Most of the animals displaying them have never escaped from a stargazer. Instead, the behavior reflects countless generations shaped by natural selection, each generation carrying forward slight advantages accumulated through ancestors that happen to react in more successful ways. The predator alters the conduct of creatures it may never touch simply because its presence has remained a persistent feature of the environment for millions of years. This influence resembles an invisible current spreading through the food web. The buried hunter rarely pursues anything across open water, yet the possibility of attack changes movement patterns, feeding habits, and choices of habitat among the animals living above it. Ecologists increasingly recognize that predators shape ecosystems, not only through direct predation, but also through the constant possibility of predation. The expectation of danger becomes an ecological force in its own right, guiding behavior long before any attack occurs. The sediment itself also participates in this delicate balance. In portions of the Mediterranean Sea, the invasive alga Caulerpa taxifolia has spread across sandy bottoms, replacing open sediment with dense vegetation. For a predator dependent upon loose sand for concealment, this transformation removes the very conditions required for successful ambush. As suitable burial habitat declines, local stargazer populations decline alongside it, and the ecological pressures they once exerted begin to weaken. Changes in predator abundance can then echo through prey communities, altering relationships that developed over immense spans of evolutionary history. The stargazer, therefore, shapes an ecosystem while remaining almost entirely unseen within it. Its greatest ecological contribution is measured not simply by the animals it captures, but by the countless choices made every day by creatures attempting to avoid becoming the next one. Beneath an ordinary patch of sand rests a predator whose most enduring legacy is written into the behavior of an entire community, a presence defined as much by expectation as by action. There are creatures that alarm because they display obvious weapons, and there are creatures that linger in memory for a far less tangible reason. The stargazer belongs to the second kind. Long after its venom, electricity, and camouflage have been understood, many people remain unsettled simply by looking at its face. The reaction often arrives before conscious thought, as though the mind has recognized that something about the arrangement is profoundly different while still struggling to explain why. Human perception has been shaped by millions of years of recognizing faces that follow a familiar pattern. Eyes normally occupy the front of the head, looking toward the world ahead. The mouth follows beneath them, opening in the same direction. This arrangement has become so deeply expected that the brain identifies it almost instantly, whether the face belongs to another person, a mammal, a bird, or countless other animals sharing similar anatomical orientation. The stargazer abandons that pattern almost completely. Its eyes do not search the horizon before it, they look toward the surface above. Its mouth does not project forward in the direction of travel. Instead, it opens toward the sky. The front of the skull has effectively been rotated upward until the features appear assembled according to an entirely different set of instructions. To a predator waiting beneath the sediment, this arrangement is perfectly suited to survival. To the human visual system, it appears fundamentally misplaced. That impression becomes even stronger because the face rarely appears expressive in any recognizable sense. The upward gaze remains fixed. The broad mouth often rests slightly open, exposing a dark opening that seems suspended between movement and stillness. Human observers frequently describe the appearance as frozen, unfinished, or strangely troubled, even though none of those emotional interpretations belong to the fish itself. The brain automatically searches for familiar emotional signals within a structure that was never shaped to communicate with human perception. Cognitive science offers a useful framework for understanding this experience. Researchers studying the uncanny have found that people often experience discomfort when something resembles an expected pattern closely enough to be recognizable, while differing in crucial ways that resist immediate explanation. The disturbance does not arise from complete unfamiliarity. Instead, it emerges because the mind repeatedly attempts to fit what it sees into an established category, only to discover that important expectations remain unresolved. The stargazer produces precisely this effect. It possesses a face, yet the face refuses to behave according to the ordinary rules governing faces. The eyes seem misplaced. The mouth appears incorrectly oriented. Every feature is anatomically correct for the animal itself, but collectively, they challenge assumptions carried unconsciously by the observer. Recognition and contradiction exist together within the same instant, creating an impression that often persists long after the encounter has ended. Marine biologists and science writers have frequently remarked that this response differs from the reaction inspired by sharks or moray eels. Those animals usually evoke immediate awareness of physical danger because their teeth and behavior clearly communicate predation. The stargazer often produces something less direct and more difficult to describe. Even photographs and scientific illustrations can preserve the sensation, removed entirely from any possibility of physical harm. The unusual face continues to unsettle because the visual puzzle remains unsolved. Across many coastal cultures, stories have emerged describing hidden beings beneath sand or shallow water that watch unseen before reaching upward from below. Traditions from the Mediterranean, Japan, and islands scattered across the Pacific developed independently, yet many contain remarkably similar images of concealed watchers beneath the seafloor. The stargazer cannot be credited as the source of every one of those legends. Human imagination has always woven many creatures into folklore. Yet when the living animal is finally revealed, resting beneath a thin covering of sand with only its upward gaze exposed, it resembles the kind of hidden presence those stories have long imagined. A real creature carrying a face that seems to belong equally to biology and to myth. Some of the most valuable scientific discoveries emerge not because nature follows familiar rules, but because it quietly ignores them. Among electric fishes, the stargazer occupies one of those uncommon places where an apparent exception becomes an opportunity. Its electric organ has attracted lasting scientific interest, not simply because it produces biological electricity, but because it does so after abandoning what almost every other electric fish retains. The ability to generate an electric discharge exists on its own, while the ability to perceive electrical fields never appeared. For researchers investigating the origins of bioelectrogenesis, this separation removes one of the greatest challenges of experimental biology. In species such as the electric eel or the elephant fish, electrical generation and electrical sensing operate together as parts of an integrated system. Understanding the role of one often requires carefully disrupting the other through laboratory experiments. The Stargazer presents a remarkably different situation. Evolution itself has already isolated the generating system, leaving scientists with a naturally occurring example of electricity functioning without an accompanying electrical sense. That distinction allows researchers to ask more focused questions about development, physiology, and genetic regulation. They can examine how an electric organ forms, how it is maintained, and how it operates when its only apparent purpose is defense and predation. Without electroreception influencing behavior, navigation, or communication, the organ becomes a clearer expression of electrical generation alone. The animal serves as a living comparison, not because it is simpler, but because one entire biological pathway never entered the evolutionary picture. The Stargazer family provides another remarkable advantage. Within the same family, the genus Astroscopus and the genus Uranoscopus each evolved electric organs independently. One transformed muscles that originally controlled delicate eye movements. The other reshaped muscles that once generated sound. Different tissues, different developmental histories, and different evolutionary routes ultimately produced organs capable of delivering comparable electrical discharges. Few biological systems offer such an elegant opportunity to compare separate solutions that arrived at nearly identical functional results while remaining closely related through ancestry. As molecular biology expanded beyond anatomy into the study of genes and proteins, the story became even more remarkable. Comparative genomic research, examining independently evolved electric fishes, has revealed recurring changes within genes responsible for producing voltage-gated sodium channel proteins. These proteins regulate the movement of charged particles across cell membranes and play a central role in generating electrical activity within living tissue. Across lineages separated by hundreds of millions of years, investigators have identified matching amino acid substitutions occurring within corresponding regions of these same genes. The resemblance extends beyond outward appearance and into the molecular architecture that makes electrical discharge possible. Those lineages last shared a common ancestor long before the age of the dinosaurs, yet natural selection repeatedly favored comparable genetic alterations. The pattern demonstrates convergent evolution operating at extraordinary precision. Entire organs evolved independently. Specialized cells emerged through different developmental pathways, and beneath those visible transformations, some of the same molecular adjustments appeared again and again. Evolution did not merely rediscover a useful structure, it repeatedly uncovered similar genetic answers while traveling through entirely separate biological histories. The eye muscles of Astroscopus provide an especially revealing example of biological flexibility. Structures once devoted to precise movement of the eyes were gradually reorganized into tissues specialized for producing electrical current. Rather than inventing an entirely new organ from nothing, evolution remodeled existing architecture, preserving what remained useful while assigning it an entirely different purpose. Human engineering rarely achieves such complete reassignment of function using existing machinery, yet living systems accomplish it through countless generations of gradual change. Taken together, these discoveries suggest that biological electricity is not an isolated curiosity hidden within a handful of unusual fishes. It is a dependable destination that natural selection repeatedly reaches whenever particular ecological challenges persist long enough. The stargazer demonstrates that the path toward that destination may begin with different tissues, follow different developmental routes, and even discard familiar sensory systems altogether, while still arriving at the same enduring solution written into the language of living cells. A familiar idea begins to unravel the longer the stargazer is observed. Camouflage is usually described as the art of resemblance, the careful arrangement of color, pattern, and texture until one living thing appears to be another. Leaves resemble leaves, branches resemble branches, and stones resemble stones. The disguise succeeds because an observer mistakes the organism for part of its surroundings. The stargazer follows an altogether different principle, one that reaches beyond imitation into something far more complete. Its body does not merely resemble the seafloor. It enters the seafloor. With patient movements of its fins and body, it settles beneath the loose sediment until almost every visible contour disappears beneath the grains. What remains above the surface are only those structures required to continue breathing, watching, and striking. The animal has not painted itself with the colors of its surroundings. It has become physically embedded within them, leaving almost nothing available for vision to interpret as a separate creature. That distinction carries surprising weight. Most camouflaged animals remain recognizable objects once an observer knows where to focus attention. A careful search eventually separates body from background. The outline appears, the texture becomes slightly different, or a shift in illumination exposes the deception. The organism always remains distinct from the landscape, even when discovery requires patience. The stargazer offers remarkably few such opportunities because its outline has been surrendered to the environment itself. Instead of disguising a predator against the sand, evolution dissolved the apparent boundary between predator and habitat. The seafloor is no longer simply the stage upon which the hunt unfolds. It becomes part of the hunter's body, extending its concealment through every surrounding grain. A passing fish does not overlook an animal that resembles sand. It encounters sand that unexpectedly contains an animal. The difference may appear subtle in language, yet it represents an entirely different biological strategy. This transformation changes the nature of danger itself. Threat no longer occupies a particular location within the landscape. It becomes woven into the landscape. Every stretch of undisturbed sediment carries the possibility that it is not entirely empty, even though nothing visible announces the presence of concealed life. The predator remains absent from sight because sight is directed toward the wrong category. The eye searches for another organism, while the organism has surrendered its visible identity to the ground beneath it. For prey animals, this creates an evolutionary dilemma with remarkably few solutions. Avoiding buried ambush predators by abandoning sandy habitats would also require abandoning one of the richest feeding grounds along warm coastal shores. Countless small fishes and crustaceans depend upon these bottoms for food, shelter, or both. Natural selection, therefore, cannot simply reward individuals that refuse to approach open sediment, because those individuals would lose access to essential resources needed for survival and reproduction. Over immense spans of evolutionary time, prey species instead refine caution, timing, group behavior, and rapid escape responses, yet none of these adaptations removes the fundamental constraint. The habitat itself remains indispensable. Every meal gathered near the bottom preserves the possibility of passing above a concealed hunter. The conflict cannot be solved by choosing another world. It can only be managed within the one already occupied. Seen from this perspective, the Stargazer reveals an unusually elegant form of predation. Its greatest weapon is neither venom nor electricity, remarkable though both may be. Those defenses become important only after contact has already begun. The decisive advantage lies much earlier, in the disappearance of the boundary between animal and place. The surrounding sediment ceases to function as scenery and becomes an extension of the hunting apparatus itself. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson carried within this remarkable fish. Evolution did not simply shape a creature capable of surviving on the seafloor. It reshaped the meaning of camouflage until the habitat itself became an instrument of predation, a landscape transformed into a living mechanism through which the hunter waits without announcing that it was ever there at all. Not every powerful animal achieves that power through speed, size, or relentless pursuit. Some arrive there by surrendering movement itself. The Stargazer gathers together an unusual collection of defenses: camouflage joined with a living lure, venom hidden within defensive spines, and biological electricity produced on command. Looking across those adaptations invites a broader reflection, not merely upon what the animal possesses, but upon the circumstances that demanded such an extraordinary collection in the first place. The most direct ecological explanation is familiar. Life upon the seafloor is intensely competitive. Countless predators search the same limited feeding grounds, while prey species remain alert to every disturbance that passes overhead. In such a setting, each additional advantage increases the chance of surviving long enough to reproduce. Camouflage improves hunting success. Venom discourages attackers. Electricity creates another layer of protection and another means of subduing prey. Natural selection steadily rewards each successful addition until a remarkably specialized predator emerges. Yet another interpretation slowly takes shape when the Stargazer is viewed not through the number of its weapons, but through the options it abandoned long before those weapons appeared. Nearly every active predator retains the possibility of retreat. A failed attack may be followed by escape. An approaching hunter can often be avoided through speed, agility, or endurance. The Stargazer invested almost none of its evolutionary history in those abilities. It buried itself within the substrate and accepted stillness as the defining principle of its existence. That decision carried consequences extending far beyond hunting technique. A creature committed to remaining concealed cannot rely upon rapid flight when concealment fails. It cannot accelerate across open water or weave through reefs in search of refuge. Once discovered, its choices become remarkably limited. The same body perfectly shaped for disappearing into loose sediment is poorly suited for prolonged escape. Every advantage gained through immobility is balanced by vulnerability whenever the hiding place no longer protects its occupant. This perspective casts venom in a different light. The defensive spines do not exist because the Stargazer intends to pursue conflict. They become important only after another animal has already breached the boundary of concealment. The painful injection represents a final barrier between predator and prey, arriving only after the earlier strategy of remaining unnoticed has failed. Electricity occupies a similar place within the sequence. The discharge may surprise an attacker or create a brief opportunity to survive, but it is not designed to outrun danger. It functions at the very edge of necessity, when distance can no longer solve the problem. The encounter with a predator capable of penetrating camouflage illustrates this balance with unusual clarity. An animal equipped to detect hidden bodies beneath the sediment removes the greatest strength the stargazer possesses. In that moment, venom and electricity become the remaining defenses available to a fish that cannot simply abandon its position and flee across the seafloor. They are not symbols of effortless dominance. They are the biological cost of committing so completely to invisibility that movement itself has become secondary. Many ambush predators participate in versions of this same exchange. They sacrifice speed in return for concealment, accepting that surprise will accomplish what pursuit no longer can. The stargazer simply carries that bargain farther than most. It reduced movement to the smallest practical measure, entrusted survival to remaining unseen, and gradually accumulated additional defenses for every circumstance in which invisibility proved insufficient. Seen together, those adaptations reveal a remarkably coherent design. Camouflage begins the encounter before it is recognized. The lure shortens the remaining distance. Venom and electricity wait beyond that final threshold, prepared for the rare moments when concealment no longer holds. The deeper the commitment to stillness became across evolutionary time, the greater the need for protection after discovery, until every abandoned possibility of escape was answered by another, carefully refined weapon. Across the world, countless stretches of seafloor remain known only as faint outlines on maps, broad regions measured from far above but rarely examined where life actually unfolds. The ocean has yielded extraordinary discoveries for centuries, yet much of its greatest expanse continues to exist beyond sustained human observation. Every expedition adds another fragment to the picture, while immense reaches of sediment continue their ancient rhythms beyond the reach of routine study. Although remarkable progress has been made in mapping the shape of the seabed, meaningful biological exploration remains concentrated in places that are comparatively accessible, economically valuable, or close to shore. Vast sandy plains and broad silty bottoms extending into deeper water receive far less attention. These are precisely the environments where members of the Stargazer family have repeatedly demonstrated an exceptional ability to disappear into the landscape, leaving little visible trace of their presence even when researchers pass directly overhead. At present, science recognizes 51 described species belonging to this remarkable family. Even so, detailed observations of their natural lives remain surprisingly uncommon. Much of what is understood comes not from prolonged encounters in their ordinary habitat, but from fishing equipment that unintentionally brings them to the surface, preserved museum specimens, and the occasional meeting between divers and individuals inhabiting relatively shallow coastal waters. Those valuable glimpses reveal anatomy in impressive detail, yet they seldom capture the uninterrupted sequence of ordinary behavior unfolding beneath undisturbed sediment. That leaves an extraordinary collection of unanswered observations. No one can confidently describe how long an individual commonly remains beneath the substrate between successful feeding opportunities. The precise process by which it selects one patch of sand instead of another has received remarkably little direct study. Even the role of its electric discharge during an authentic hunting event beneath natural layers of sediment has almost never been documented through prolonged observation in the wild. Laboratory investigations illuminate individual mechanisms, but the complete performance within its native environment remains largely concealed beneath the surface. Marine biologists regularly recover animals entirely unknown to science while sampling benthic sediments from deeper waters. New fishes, unfamiliar crustaceans, delicate worms, unusual mollusks, and countless smaller organisms continue to emerge from habitats that experienced uninterrupted evolutionary history without sustained human attention. Each discovery demonstrates that even seemingly ordinary stretches of sand may shelter biological innovations that escaped notice simply because almost no one had examined them closely before. Against that broader pattern, the possibility of additional undiscovered relatives within the Stargazer family becomes neither extravagant nor unexpected. Their known distribution already spans an enormous portion of the warmer oceans, suggesting a lineage capable of adapting to many varieties of sandy and muddy habitat. If populations inhabit deeper benthic environments that remain difficult to reach consistently, they may preserve characteristics unlike those documented in currently described species. Those possibilities invite thoughtful curiosity rather than certainty. Future discoveries could reveal more elaborate structures used to attract prey, greater ability to disappear beneath thicker layers of sediment, electric organs assembled from tissues different from those known today, or venom containing chemical compounds that have never undergone careful biological analysis. Evolution repeatedly demonstrates that familiar solutions can be rebuilt from unfamiliar materials whenever similar ecological pressures persist over immense spans of time. The existing catalog of 51 described species represents what human effort has managed to encounter through generations of exploration, fishing activity, and scientific collection. It is a remarkable achievement, yet also a reminder that discovery is shaped by where nets have traveled, where research vessels have worked, and where people possessed the means to look. Beyond those surveyed places, the seafloor continues without announcing what it contains. Somewhere beneath undisturbed layers of sand, lives may still unfold exactly as they have for countless generations, awaiting neither attention nor recognition, existing patiently until the moment observation finally arrives. Patience is among the hardest behaviors to measure because it leaves almost nothing visible behind. Motion can be timed, pursuit can be recorded, and a strike can be captured within fractions of a second. Waiting leaves no such trace. It unfolds beneath the surface, carried only by the passing of time itself. For the stargazer, that unseen interval occupies far more of life than the sudden burst that finally ends it. Researchers know that an individual may remain buried without movement for many hours, and perhaps for several days, although no long-term behavioral study has established a reliable upper limit. Beneath its covering of sand, the body settles into a remarkably economical state. Metabolism slows, conserving energy, while the muscles remain prepared for a movement that may not arrive until long after daylight has faded and returned again. Every aspect of its design favors endurance over activity, allowing life to continue while spending remarkably little. Only the upward-facing eyes continue their careful work. They remain uncovered, watching the shifting water above as small fish drift through changing currents and drifting particles pass across the field of view. Nothing about the animal suggests haste. The surrounding landscape changes constantly, while the buried predator preserves almost perfect stillness, responding only when the proper combination of movement, distance, and opportunity arrives within reach. Science can describe the mechanics of this posture with increasing precision, yet the experience behind it remains inaccessible. Neuroscience possesses no accepted framework capable of explaining what occurs within the nervous system of such a compact vertebrate, while it remains buried for such prolonged intervals. Electrical activity continues inside the brain, sensory information continues to arrive, and muscles remain prepared to act. Beyond those measurable facts, certainty fades into unanswered possibility. Modern research has demonstrated that fishes possess functioning nervous systems, specialized sensory cells associated with the detection of harmful stimuli, and capacities for learning that extend well beyond simple reflexes. Many species recognize places, remember previous experiences, alter behavior through repeated encounters, and display preferences that persist over time. Even with this growing body of evidence, the broader question of consciousness in fishes remains genuinely unresolved within scientific literature, with thoughtful disagreement continuing among researchers studying animal minds. The stargazer occupies an especially intriguing place within that uncertainty. Its brain is modest by vertebrate standards, and much of its observable behavior appears strongly linked to direct environmental triggers. A suitable prey animal passes overhead, and the concealed body explodes upward. Pressure from a threatening encounter activates electricity or venom. The sequence often appears immediate, efficient, and highly specialized, giving every impression of a nervous system refined through countless generations toward dependable responses rather than flexible improvisation. Yet, reducing the animal entirely to automatic reactions leaves an emptiness that science cannot confidently fill. Throughout every buried hour, information continues entering the eyes, the inner ear, the skin, and the countless sensory pathways connecting the body to the brain. Signals are received, processed, and transformed into readiness. Whether that readiness is accompanied by any form of subjective experience remains beyond the reach of present evidence, neither confirmed nor dismissed by careful observation. Perhaps that uncertainty is fitting for an animal whose life is defined by concealment. The hidden body invites hidden questions, and both remain beneath the surface together. Whatever occurs within that buried form unfolds according to rhythms, unlike those familiar to human observers, measured not by restless movement, but by remarkable restraint. One fact, however, stands apart from speculation. The stargazer waits. It waits with a consistency few other predators can equal, preserving energy, maintaining vigilance, and trusting that the surrounding world will eventually deliver the next opportunity. Waiting is not merely one behavior among many. It is the foundation upon which every other part of its remarkable existence has been built. Long before people learned to read the language of currents, tides, and migrating shoals, the seafloor had already settled upon solutions that required no speed and almost no motion. Among them was the stargazer, an animal whose survival rests on a principle so complete that it almost disappears from ordinary thought. It endures because it solved a problem that defeats countless other predators: how to remain dangerous without becoming visible, how to remain patient without becoming passive, and how to remain fully armed without needing to launch the first attack. Many familiar marine hunters reveal themselves the moment they begin to move. Sharks carve unmistakable paths through the water. Barracudas announce their approach through swift acceleration. Dolphins generate pressure waves and shifting patterns of sound as they travel. Even before prey identifies the predator itself, movement has already carried information outward. The water becomes a messenger, broadcasting the arrival of something alive. The stargazer follows another path entirely. Buried beneath sand or soft sediment, it presents almost nothing that the surrounding world can distinguish. There is no body crossing open water, no sweeping outline against the light, no advancing wake. Its form blends so completely with the substrate that the ordinary signals used by prey lose their usefulness. To the senses available to most passing animals, the predator is not merely concealed. It is functionally indistinguishable from the ground supporting every movement above. That principle is neither poetic exaggeration nor symbolic comparison. It is the literal operating method of an animal refined across at least 11 million years of evolutionary history. During that immense span of time, natural selection repeatedly favored individuals that disappeared more completely into their surroundings, conserved energy more efficiently, and responded only when success became overwhelmingly likely. Every generation added another subtle improvement until concealment itself became the foundation of survival. Seen from that broader perspective, the stargazer represents more than an unusual fish. It illustrates a recurring pattern found throughout the living world. The greatest influence within an ecosystem is not always produced by constant action. Sometimes it comes from the lasting possibility that action could occur at any moment. Organisms alter feeding routes, swimming heights, resting places, and daily routines because an unseen danger may exist nearby. The response appears even when no attack takes place. Examples of this principle extend far beyond coastal sediments. Countless predators reshape the behavior of surrounding animals simply by existing within the landscape. Grazing mammals change where they feed. Smaller fishes alter schooling patterns. Crustaceans hesitate before leaving shelter. The invisible expectation of danger spreads outward through an ecosystem, influencing lives that never experience direct contact with the predator itself. Presence becomes more powerful than pursuit. Nowhere does that relationship become more complete than across broad stretches of the seafloor. Here, the boundary between landscape and hunter begins to dissolve. Sand that appears empty may contain watchful eyes just beneath the surface. A place that seems entirely harmless can already possess every feature necessary for predation. The environment itself becomes part of the weapon, not because the landscape has changed, but because one patient inhabitant has learned to merge with it so completely that separating one from the other becomes nearly impossible. The stargazer did not invent this ancient strategy. Other ambush predators arrived at similar solutions through different evolutionary paths, each shaped by its own history and anatomy. Yet the stargazer carried the idea farther, layering electricity upon concealment, venom upon electricity, and extraordinary restraint beneath them all. It transformed stillness into strength and allowed the seafloor to speak on its behalf. Across millions of years, that patient design has continued, almost unchanged, reminding every passing creature that the most enduring forces in nature are often the ones that leave almost no visible trace at all. A map of the world's coastlines reveals an unexpected truth long before any individual animal comes into view. Broad ribbons of warm, shallow water wrap around continents, meeting beaches, estuaries, bays, and gently sloping seabeds. Across those immense stretches of sand lives a hunter that is neither exceptionally scarce nor confined to some isolated corner of the sea. The stargazer belongs not to a forgotten pocket of the ocean, but to habitats that surround much of the inhabited world. At this very moment, members of this remarkable family rest beneath sediments in the Mediterranean Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Black Sea, and the Red Sea. Close relatives occupy coastal waters surrounding Japan, Brazil, Portugal, Australia, and many other shorelines where suitable habitat exists. Their distribution spans thousands of kilometers, which is about 6,214 miles, connecting distant coastlines through a shared evolutionary design that has succeeded across widely separated marine environments. The pattern behind that distribution is surprisingly uncomplicated. Wherever warm water settles over sandy or silty bottoms, conditions become favorable for a predator built around concealment rather than pursuit. Those settings describe an enormous portion of the world's coastline. The same combination of loose sediment, passing prey, and stable bottom conditions appears again and again across different oceans, allowing the stargazer and its relatives to establish themselves without drawing attention to their presence. Many of those places are familiar to people. They are beaches where families swim during calm afternoons, sheltered coves where small boats lower their anchors, fishing grounds visited before sunrise, and tidal shallows crossed by wading feet. Beneath many of those ordinary scenes, a buried predator may already be present, remaining entirely unnoticed because its survival has never depended upon being seen. That absence from ordinary awareness carries its own significance. Countless people spend their entire lives near the sea without encountering a living stargazer. Many have never heard its name, despite sharing coastlines with animals that have occupied those habitats for immense spans of geological time. Such obscurity is not evidence of rarity. It is evidence of extraordinary success. A creature perfected for remaining unseen naturally leaves only the smallest imprint upon everyday human experience. Unlike charismatic marine animals that inspire stories through spectacular migrations or dramatic appearances above the surface, the stargazer requires no audience. It asks for no recognition and gains no advantage from curiosity directed toward it. Whether scientists study it extensively or whether beachgoers remain unaware of its existence, its daily routine continues with remarkable consistency. Sand settles over its back, passing fish move overhead, and the ancient rhythm of waiting resumes without interruption. Human knowledge has expanded rapidly across recent centuries, filling libraries with descriptions of marine life and charts of distant seas. Yet the stargazer reminds us that discovery and existence are entirely different things. An organism does not become real when it enters a field guide, appears in a documentary, or receives scientific attention. It has already been carrying out its way of life, generation after generation, independent of every observation made by our species. Long before the earliest people walked onto a shoreline and looked across moving water, these predators had already settled into their ecological role. They were buried beneath sediments, watching the water above, equipped with adaptations refined across deep evolutionary time. Civilizations rose beside the sea, traded across it, explored it, and attempted to measure it, while the stargazer continued almost unchanged beneath familiar coastal floors. Perhaps that is the lasting perspective offered by this remarkable fish. The ocean floor never waited for human discovery, acknowledgement, or explanation. It was already inhabited, already governed by relationships forged over millions of years, already filled with lives unfolding beyond ordinary notice. The stargazer simply remained where it had always been, concealed beneath the sand, occupying a world that existed in full long before anyone thought to search for it. Beneath every stretch of open water lies a community that rarely appears in postcards, documentaries, or ordinary conversation, yet it supports much of what happens throughout the sea. Hidden within layers of sediment are countless benthic organisms, animals that live inside the seabed, across its surface, or just above it. The stargazer belongs to this immense society, not as an isolated curiosity, but as one participant in an intricate system whose complexity continues to surprise the scientists who study it. For many years, the open ocean captured most public imagination, with whales, dolphins, and schools of shimmering fish dominating our picture of marine life. Yet, the benthic realm performs work that reaches far beyond its own boundaries. As organic material drifts downward from the waters above, enormous communities of animals, bacteria, and other living organisms break it apart, recycle nutrients, and return essential chemical building blocks to the wider ocean. Much of the marine food web ultimately depends upon processes unfolding within these sediments, even though they remain almost entirely beyond ordinary human observation. Within that living landscape, the stargazer occupies only one level of an astonishing hierarchy. Its own body serves as habitat for organisms adapted to an existence every bit as specialized as its own. Documented intestinal parasites, including Hysterothalacium aduncum and the nematode Philometra globiceps, spend their entire lives inside the digestive system of the fish. Their world is measured not by coastlines or currents, but by the rhythms of the animal that shelters them. Just as the stargazer disappears into sand, these smaller creatures disappear into the stargazer, creating another complete ecological layer nested within the first. Each layer depends upon another without ever existing in isolation. The predator feeds upon smaller fish and crustaceans. Parasites depend upon the predator. Microscopic organisms process waste released into surrounding sediments. Countless invertebrates recycle nutrients that later nourish plants and algae, which support the prey that eventually passes above the buried hunter. Every connection extends outward into another, until the boundaries between individual stories become almost impossible to separate. Even the beginning of a stargazer's life demonstrates that hidden connection. Newly hatched larvae bear little resemblance to the adults concealed beneath the seabed. Transparent and carried by surface currents, they drift across broad expanses of ocean before gradually settling into suitable coastal habitats. This dispersal allows genes to continue flowing between populations separated by remarkable distances. Groups inhabiting the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean remain connected through generations of drifting larvae, despite the fact that adult fish spend their lives close to the seabed and rarely travel far from their chosen hunting grounds. Seen from above, those distant populations appear isolated by geography. Beneath the surface, they remain linked by invisible exchanges occurring across successive generations. Ocean currents become pathways for inheritance rather than merely movements of water, carrying the earliest life stages from one coastline toward another with patient consistency. None of these relationships require human management to continue. Nutrients circulate, larvae drift, parasites complete their life cycles, predators influence prey, and sediments sustain extraordinary biological diversity, regardless of whether anyone records the process. Scientific understanding grows with each expedition, yet the underlying system has operated successfully for immense spans of evolutionary time without needing recognition from those who arrived only recently beside the shore. It is tempting to imagine the seabed as an empty plain beneath the more colorful waters above. The reality is far richer. The ocean floor resembles a vast city whose countless residents occupy different layers, perform different roles, and maintain countless exchanges that keep the entire community functioning. Streets are replaced by currents, buildings by sediments, and conversations by chemical signals, inherited behaviors, and ancient ecological relationships. Among those enduring inhabitants rests the stargazer, one of the oldest and most thoroughly equipped residents of that hidden metropolis, woven into a living network whose true scale is only beginning to emerge through careful scientific observation. Long before marine biology gave this animal a name, the human imagination had already settled upon a recurring idea. Across distant coastlines, separated by oceans and by centuries, stories emerged of unseen beings beneath the sand, of hidden watchers below the surface, of dangers that revealed themselves only after the moment of contact had already passed. Those stories differed in language, appearance, and belief, yet they often shared the same underlying pattern, the conviction that the ground itself could conceal a living presence. The Stargazer does not exist because of those traditions, nor did those traditions arise because people understood the animal. Instead, they reflect something older in the relationship between living creatures and the environments that shaped them. Human beings evolved by learning that movement is not the only sign of life, and that survival sometimes depends upon recognizing what remains almost perfectly still. The nervous system notices subtle irregularities long before conscious thought explains them, preserving instincts refined across immense stretches of evolutionary time. In the case of the Stargazer, that intuition happens to align remarkably well with biological reality. Buried beneath a covering of sediment, its body disappears into the surrounding landscape. Only its upward-facing eyes remain exposed, fixed upon the water above. Its mouth points toward the surface, rather than forward, prepared to open with astonishing speed. Within its body, specialized organs stand ready to produce an electrical discharge, while venomous spines provide another layer of defense if concealment should fail. Nothing in this arrangement belongs to imagination alone. Every part of it is documented anatomy, serving a precise ecological purpose. Yet the emotional response it often evokes reaches beyond anatomy. Many predators advertise themselves through movement. A hunting shark cuts through open water. A barracuda flashes across the reef. Even swift attacks announce themselves through visible motion. The Stargazer removes that signal almost entirely. Before the strike, there is no approaching silhouette, no obvious pursuit, no clear indication that another animal occupies the space below. The first unmistakable evidence of the predator is frequently the attack itself. Perhaps that absence explains why similar themes appear in folklore from Mediterranean shores, Pacific islands, and the coasts of Japan. Tales describing creatures beneath the sand, watchers below the seabed, or unseen hunters waiting underneath developed independently within cultures that never exchanged those ideas directly. None of those traditions specifically described the Stargazer. Many included entirely mythical beings with impossible characteristics. Even so, each story revolved around a remarkably familiar principle that danger sometimes resides where ordinary vision expects only empty ground. Science eventually separated myth from measurable reality, identifying the animals responsible for many encounters once explained through legend. In doing so, it did not erase the deeper pattern. Instead, it revealed that evolution had repeatedly favored predators capable of disappearing so completely that detection became extraordinarily difficult. The Stargazer represents one of the most refined examples of that strategy, not because it possesses supernatural qualities, but because natural selection patiently assembled an organism whose success depends upon remaining unnoticed. The upward-facing eyes, the buried body, the concealed mouth, the electrical organs, and the carefully positioned lure all contribute to a single biological design. Each adaptation serves the same enduring objective, allowing the predator to remain part of its surroundings until the precise instant action becomes worthwhile. Nothing is hurried. Nothing is wasted. The environment itself becomes the framework within which the hunter exists. At this very moment, somewhere beneath a stretch of ordinary coastal sand, in water shallow enough for people to cross on foot, one of these remarkable fish waits exactly as generations before it have waited. Above, currents continue their patient movement toward distant shores. Small fish drift overhead, unaware of the eyes beneath them. The seabed appears unchanged, offering no visible sign that another life rests just below its surface, watching with ancient persistence from the world beneath. A A single idea has followed us through every layer of this journey, becoming clearer with each new detail revealed from beneath the seabed. The Stargazer did not become one of the ocean's most effective predators through speed, strength, or relentless pursuit. It endured because, over immense spans of evolutionary time, natural selection refined a different principle entirely. The greatest advantage was not to become more visible or more powerful in open water. It was to become indistinguishable from the place where life expected nothing at all. Most predators reveal themselves before the hunt is complete. A shark announces its arrival through movement. A barracuda leaves a fleeting outline against the water. Even the smallest pursuing hunter creates disturbances that ripple outward through the surrounding sea. Motion produces pressure. Pressure produces awareness. Every chase begins by informing the prey that something has entered its world. The Stargazer follows another path. It does not announce itself because there is almost nothing to announce. Buried beneath loose sediment, it merges so completely with its surroundings that the distinction between animal and habitat begins to disappear. The sand conceals the body. The body adopts the shape of the sand. Only upward-facing eyes remain exposed, watching the world above with remarkable patience. The lure waits. The electrical organs remain prepared. The venomous spines remain ready. Yet the landscape itself appears unchanged. That strategy reaches beyond camouflage in the ordinary sense. Camouflage usually asks an observer to mistake one thing for another. The Stargazer asks something even more remarkable. It asks the observer to overlook the possibility that anything exists at all. The apparent emptiness becomes its greatest defense and its greatest weapon. The seabed itself becomes the final stage of the adaptation, completing a biological design that has been refined since the Miocene, long before familiar coastlines assumed their present forms, and long before modern oceans resembled those known today. Across those immense ages, climates shifted, sea levels rose and fell, continents continued their gradual movement, and countless marine lineages appeared or disappeared. Through every transformation, the basic strategy remained astonishingly effective. Wherever suitable sediment collected beneath warm coastal waters, the same patient hunter continued waiting beneath it. Generations passed without spectacle, without dramatic migration, and without changing the essential pattern that had already proven successful. There is every reason to believe that pattern will continue far beyond the span of any individual human lifetime. Long after present coastlines have altered once again, long after familiar harbors have changed, and long after our own stories have become part of history, buried predators will almost certainly remain within suitable seabeds, continuing a rhythm established across deep evolutionary time. Their persistence depends upon ecological relationships far older than civilization and entirely independent of human awareness. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson carried by this remarkable fish. The seabed never altered itself to accommodate the Stargazer. Instead, the Stargazer altered itself until the distinction between hunter and habitat nearly vanished. The sediment became concealment. Concealment became opportunity. Opportunity became survival. Every creature passing overhead entered a landscape shaped not only by currents and geology, but also by a predator hidden so completely that the environment itself became part of its anatomy. The journey reaches its final page here, yet the world beneath the waves continues without interruption. Countless grains of sand settle across coastal floors exactly as they did before this story began. Beneath some of those grains, upward-facing eyes remain fixed upon the water above, unseen and unhurried. The ocean has not changed because we learned its secret. Only our understanding has changed. After meeting the Stargazer, the sand never looks like empty ground again, because it was never empty in the first place.